Throughout history, most have assumed that the Imago Dei is a capacity that humans possess that sets us apart from the animal kingdom. Some of the most common proposals are that our intellect, our self-consciousness, our morality, or our capacity for relationships are what make us God's image. And it's true that these qualities do set us apart from animals. However, a close reading of Genesis 1:26-28 does not suggest any of these themes. While it's true that humans are superior to animals in many ways, these factors are not what make us God's image. I've been convinced by theologian Ryan Peterson and others that the Imago Dei is our human identity, plain and simple. We can reach this conclusion by examining the Hebrew word for image, tselem, and its cognates or cousin words in related languages. A tselem or image is not an abstract concept. A tselem is something concrete, a statue. Usually the term refers to the idol of a deity that's found in a temple. For example, in Numbers 33:52, God tells the Israelites that when they enter the promised land, you need to drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you, destroy all their carved images and their cast idols, their tselem, and demolish all their high places. In fact, nearly all the occurrences of this word outside Genesis refer to the idols of foreign nations. It's surprising then that God uses the word tselem to describe humans. Our concrete embodiment seems to be the point. Another example of a tselem can help explain how this works. In addition to representations of a deity, images were also used to declare the sovereignty of a particular king. Hadad-Yithel, king of Guzan, conquered a vast territory over which he then ruled. Since he could not be everywhere at once, he set up an image of himself as a representation of his sovereignty in the area far from his palace. That image is inscribed with the cognate words tselem and demuth, or likeness, both of which are used in Genesis 1 to describe humanity. This statue serves as a sort of glossary for us, telling us what the word meant to ancient people. So what does this mean for human beings? According to Genesis 1, humans function similarly to how an idol functions in a temple. The idol is not God, and humans are not God, but we represent God's sovereignty. All it takes to do this is to exist. It does not require a particular capacity or skill set on our part. An infant or a person in a coma is still physically embodied and thereby serves as a reminder of God's rule. However, our identity as God's image implies a responsibility to rule on God's behalf with delegated authority. That's explicit in Genesis 1. God says of humans that we are God's image so that we may rule over creation. We can learn more about what it means to be the image of God by looking at the two other passages in Genesis that use the word tselem. In Genesis 5, we discover that being God's image implies a familial relationship with God. In Genesis 5, the narrator describes Adam's son Seth as being in his likeness, in his image. Their father-son relationship is analogous to humans' relationship to our Creator God. We're distinct from God, but we are related. We are God's kin, a member of God's royal family. This analogy is helpful when we think about the question of whether our status as God's image can be lost. A child cannot lose their status as being the offspring of their parents, and neither can we lose our status as being God's offspring, His family. Since our status is not based on our capacity, but on the free choice of God to create us, then there's nothing we can do to lose it or to disqualify ourselves. Children can rebel against their parents, but they can never undo their family status. They can never reverse the fact that they were born to their parents. Similarly, humans can never reverse their status as created by God. Being God's image means that our identity is membership in God's royal family. Whether we realize it or not, and whether we're leaning into this identity or not, we have an exalted status, and so does every other human. Not only are we God's family, but we're brothers and sisters with every human being, no matter their capacity or likability. The doctrine of the Imago Dei has significant implications for how we think about those who are not yet born and those who are nearing the end of their life. If the Imago Dei does not require intelligence, self-consciousness, or relationality, then an unborn child qualifies as God's image. Simply by being created, by having a body, we possess intrinsic worth based on our identity as the image of God. Similarly, no loss of capacity can signal a loss of the image. The Imago Dei leaves room for an infinite variety of abilities or limitations. The experience of temporary or permanent physical or mental limitations cannot change our identity. Someone experiencing dementia is no less the image of God because their dignity never depended on their self-awareness or self-expression in the first place. If the grounding for human identity is in God rather than in ourselves, then there's nothing we can do or not do to lose it. Another striking thing about the Bible's account of the Imago Dei is that it includes both men and women. Genesis 1:26 indicates that men and women alike are made as God's image. In Genesis 2, they are together given the task of caring for and guarding the garden. More specifically, God gave the mandate to work in the garden and the parameters regarding food sources to the man, and immediately concluded that it was not good for the man to be alone. God's creation of woman was a direct response to the sense of incompleteness in creation. Together, man and woman are to subdue anything that rebels against the rule of God. Together, they are to procreate, filling the earth with more humans who can represent God's purposes on earth. And here's one thing that is often missed. Nowhere in Genesis 1 or 2 is any human told to rule over any other human. Instead, men and women are partners in the work God gave us to do. But isn't the woman made to be the man's helper? And doesn't that imply that he's in charge? I'm so glad you asked. Genesis 2:18 is often misconstrued. Our English word helper implies subservience, but the Hebrew word ezer does not. It's found in both a noun and a verb form in the Hebrew Bible, a collective 100 times. I looked up every passage to see how the word was being used. About half of those occurrences refer to God as Israel's ezer. The other half refer to a military ally in battle. Never is the word used in the Bible to refer to what a servant does for their master. Genesis 2:18 does not present hierarchy, only essential partnership. Adam cannot do the task given to humans all by himself. He needs someone comparable to him who can work alongside him. Many Christians today believe that God appointed men to lead and women to follow, a view sometimes known as complementarianism. These Christians are trying to take Scripture seriously, and while their arguments usually center in certain Pauline passages, they often appeal to the Genesis creation account, claiming that gendered hierarchies are rooted in creation. But as I see it, to find hierarchy at creation, you'd have to look to Genesis 3, which presents animosity and domination between husband and wife as a result of Adam and Eve's rebellion in the garden. It is no more appropriate to insist on hierarchy between the sexes than it is to ensure that women experience pain in childbirth, or that men sweat plenty when they're farming. God doesn't ask us to lean into or live out of these consequences. He desires that we carry on the work he gave us to do in Genesis 1 and 2, in obedience to his commands to fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the rest of creation, side by side as partners.